Welcome back to the couch, everybody. Welcome to a very special NBA episode. Today we have a special guest, first guest in a while, Armanibuckets. You may know from his over 186,000 TikTok followers. I've been a fan a while now. I'm excited to have you on, Armani. How are you?
Likewise, Jordan, I cannot wait to get into what we're going to discuss today. Thank you for having me. And likewise, I love your content and what you do on your platform. I'm looking forward to talking hoops with you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I'm pumped to get into it too. But before we get into the topic for the day, why don't you just maybe describe what it is that you do, what type of content you make, for some people who may be living under a rock and don't know by now.
So what I do on social media is basically my main form of content is daily recaps. So at the end of a day's slate of games, for example, today we're going to have 9 games, including your Celtics playing the Thunder, which is going to be electric. I'll go through for those who may have missed the games or may want to relive the games, and hopefully from an unbiased standpoint, give a recap of what happened in each and every game. Now, that can be challenging on nights like the other night when we had 12 games, and then
Yeah.
some people might say, why didn't my team get as much coverage? There is only 10 minutes that you can fill in on TikTok, so sometimes that gets challenging, but that is my goal is to provide as unbiased as I can a recap of the day's games.
Yeah, well, it is the best if you miss a game or if you just want to relive a game, you pop on TikTok, you see the little recap. I mean, that those 10 minutes are electric. And by the way, you have an incredible voice for it. You have like you have a gift from God for that intro. The voice is unbelievable. But let's get into the topic, man. We got our top 10 contenders going into the playoffs. We're about a month away, getting ready to ramp up the content for the playoffs. Let's give the people what they want. We'll go 10 to 1. Why don't you start with your number 10? Who do you have as your 10th contender in the NBA?
Okay, so I want to preface this by saying this was a very hard list to make,
Yes, it
and
was.
I think you can agree with me, Jordan, that like, oh my God, we're picking hairs between a lot of these, especially I felt like later on I was struggling a lot more, but my number 10 is the Memphis Grizzlies. What about you?
I have Memphis as well. That's funny you
Okay.
say that. I mean, like you said, it is tough. I mean, a bunch of teams get consideration here. I thought about the Clippers. I thought about the Pistons have been playing well. I left both those teams off. Tough cuts. I went with Memphis. And honestly, I think a lot of Memphis fans would probably be upset that they're this low with the record that they had, with the start to the season that they had. People might think they'd be closer to that middle range, maybe closer to the top five. For me, I have them at 10. Ja Morant has this nagging shoulder injury that's kept him in and out of the lineup all year, and he's just simply having a down year. He's at 21.7 points per game on about 55% true shooting, and he's 28% from three. Just to give you some perspective on that true shooting, that's below guys like Scoot Henderson, Keegan Murray, KCP. So not exactly the most efficient bunch when you look at Ja's season. And then since the All-Star break, he has struggled even more in terms of the jump shot. He's 11 for his last 58 three-pointers for 18.9%. So definitely some real concerns with Ja. I don't mean to make this all about Ja, but there's been a legit regression here. He's also, I looked at his like within 5 feet numbers, like his finishing stats, and in the 22-23 season, he shot 60% within 5 feet. In 21-22, which was like his best season, I think he won most improved that year. He averaged like 27 a game. He shot 65% on 8.6 attempts within 5 feet. He's down to 5.8 attempts this year, and he's down to 56.7% within 5 feet. So I mean, I've been disappointed by Ja. I know it's this injury that's, hard to stay in the lineup and play all these games and stuff, but even when he's been in, I don't think he's been as spectacular as you would think for Ja Morant. And I do really like this team. I like their depth. Jaren Jackson's been unbelievable. We'll probably make an all NBA team. But I don't know. I think if you're being led by a 6'2" point guard who can't shoot, I can't have you much higher than 10.
That all makes sense, Jordan. Now, just curious, if you were to rank them against the top teams in the West, the OKCs of the world, how far do you think they would push them in a 7 game series? Do you think it would be a quicker one or
I think it'd be quick against OKC. Yeah, I don't see him getting very far. What about you? I mean, I would pick OKC in five there.
Me too. I would pick them probably in five. Maybe give Memphis 2 games, give them a 6 game series. But the thing is, like, it feels like with a team like Memphis, I love Bill Simmons, by the way,
Me
and
too. Inspiration for this podcast. Good shout out.
there we go. He labels himself the body language doctor, and I don't want to step on his territory too much because that is his area of expertise. But when you watch the Grizzlies recently, it really feels like they're a team. Okay, so when you watch a team like Houston, Houston has the young vibe where it's like, yeah, this might not be our year where we win it all, but they're too naive to know better. It's like they almost like they have this air of it's optimism in the air. Whereas Memphis is at the stage in their growth and development where they kind of it seems like they look around the West and they I feel like it's almost like they know. They're like, "Oh shoot, we're in year 4 or 5 of this, and we're not as good as them." And I think it really kind of hit them in the last month or so because you watch these games, and yes, they pulled off that nice win against Phoenix, but should they be well, I guess without Jaren, it does make sense to struggle a little bit against a team like Phoenix, but still, they struggled against the Mavericks with their decimated team. They're pulling off these wins, but the Jaw stuff, like you said, is like if Ja is this player now, and that's your top 2 guy, and you're gonna look at him to close games for you. I feel like they're in a separate tier than the top teams in the West, the teams that are going to win. And that's going to lead to a very interesting offseason discussion about where they would head in the future if that's the case and they head where we think they're headed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I think you look at like the role players on this team, I love them. Like there's so many guys here that are underrated that maybe casual fans wouldn't think of as like really impactful role players, but guys like Scottie Pippen Jr., Jalen Wells, Santi Aldama have like legitimately been perfect for what this team wants. And it just seems like they might not have the top end talent now, which is weird to say when you look at John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bain as like a pretty talented group, but just not quite there with, like you said, the top teams in the league. I have some funny stats, some strange stats to bring up on them before we move on. You did mention the Jaren injury, of course, but they are 5-6 post All-Star break. They dropped from the seventh ranked defensive rating to 21st. And
Whoa.
I know Jaren's been out, but he's also been in some of those games. I thought their defense to start this year was just absolutely electric, and it just hasn't been the same. You mentioned the Phoenix game; they give up what they won, but they give up 148 or something in that crazy showdown. Um, but yeah, I just think the other thing about them is this style with their pace. I love how fast they are. They're fun. They're one of the best teams to watch on just a random league pass night. But I think in the playoffs, when teams get more locked in, teams are sharper. They're getting back on defense. It's not as easy to get those transition opportunities. It becomes more of a half court game. It becomes, can you execute? Can you knock down shots? And I don't see the ceiling for this team. And you're right about all these offseason conversations. And you're right about bringing up that it's what, 4 years of this.
Yeah. Also, one last thing on Memphis. I feel like the depth that they have, it can be such a great thing, but it also can be kind of a crutch at points because early in the season, it felt like guys like I love Jay Huff. And it felt like Jay Huff and you mentioned Scottie Pippen Jr., who now is getting his normal role back, but it felt like those guys who were so integral to them early in the season have kind of seen their minutes like a roller coaster ride.
Right.
And I feel like that has to affect the locker room too. So you have this great depth, but it's hard to like when you have 12 or 13 of those guys, it's hard to kind of keep a rhythm and a consistent rotation. But
Yeah. And
that defensive rating is crazy. I didn't realize it had fallen that dramatically.
yeah, I know. I was surprised too, but I was also like remembering watching them and being like, oh, they're actually not guarding as well as they were, or as well as I thought they were. But yeah, so I mean, I guess we land at the same spot with Memphis at 10, kind of a fun team, a good team, but not a great team. Let's go to number 9. Who do you have?
Well, this is going to offend the Grizzlies fans, I think, for sure. But I have Minnesota at 9.
We are in lockstep, my man. I got him as well.
There we go. It's just for me with Minnesota, it's a team that hasn't had their full group pretty much since when? Since the beginning of the season. And
Yeah.
now we're finally about to see it. Once Rudy is back from his back stuff, which he is back, but I think he's going to be sitting tonight, they said, maybe questionable. So you had a group that was figuring it out with this new Randall and DiVincenzo part of it. Then they both get hurt, and they've won their last 10 games when Randall's healthy. And I feel like we're as a basketball collective, we're underestimating the DiVincenzo addition because it took him a little bit to get acclimated. But now every time he shoots the ball, I feel like it's going in. I don't know, I don't have his percentages off the top of my head, but it's just those guys, I feel like everybody was ready to rush and say, "Oh, it's not working. They should have kept Cat." And I'm not saying they shouldn't have, but also that's a team that was second place in the West last year, and the team that beat them in the playoffs is gone. So by default, I feel strongly about Minnesota, considering that the only team that could beat them was a Mavericks team that no longer exists, unfortunately. So I
Yeah,
really I like them.
yeah, I like him too. And you mentioned the injuries with some of the stars, Randall, Gobert, DiVincenzo going out, and I have always thought like there are good sides to injuries sometimes during the regular season, and one of those things is guys get opportunities, right? And you see the emergence with a Terrence Shannon Jr., with Jalen Clark giving them real minutes, Naz Reid getting thrust into the starting role, and them figuring out this like fun, athletic, small ball lineup that actually gave them some really good nights, and they beat Oklahoma City with that team, 2 games. So I think, seeing those guys emerge has made me think of them a little bit differently in terms of their lineup versatility. Like now, when they are fully healthy, they can go big with Randall and Gobert, and they can be that elite defense. Or they can close small, and they can close with Nas at the 5 if they really can't get anything going on offense. Put DiVincenzo in there, like you said, he's been shooting the lights out, and go that route. I want to talk about what this team looks like against the Thunder because to me, other than like I would say Denver and the Lakers, I think this is the team in the West that I could see pulling off the upset. And in those games, like I mentioned with Nas at the 5, they have this like speed and athleticism and defense that is one of the rare traits that can match up with OKC in those areas. Like OKC is this fast, athletic, like waves of defenders kind of team. And Minnesota can actually match it with physicality and that same type of athleticism and defense. And then it's pretty much all Anthony Edwards on offense. The spacing kind of gets rough here, but Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid, like when they have those nights like they did against Oklahoma City, they can actually give that team a real series, I think. What do you think about that matchup?
Absolutely. And I think that the biggest tell of that was the Edwards on Chet, the infamous slam that he had, and then the
Yeah,
flex right in his grill after. This team is not intimidated by the Thunder at all. And that's not to say that the Thunder don't scare people, because I think that they are being discredited at this point too. But yeah, I feel like Minnesota, and I'm so glad that you mentioned those two youngsters in Jalen Clark and Terrence Shannon Jr., because that is their ace up their sleeve. That is the card that if Chris Finch is willing to actually give them minutes and actually not have them rotting at the end of his bench like he did earlier in the season, I think those guys can really actually swing a series. The confidence that Shannon has played in some of these games, including that Lakers game when Ant gets tossed and then Shannon almost leads the comeback by himself. Those guys can really be a difference maker. You mentioned their speed and their versatility with their lineups. This team, I wouldn't be shocked if they beat the Thunder in a best of seven. That's again, I hate to say that because it sounds like we're disparaging OKC and what they've accomplished, but it's more so how good the West is for me and how good a lot of these teams are. So, by the way, tonight is I hope Rudy plays because that's a great test for them playing the Nuggets. I don't know when this episode is coming out, so but that game against the Nuggets, we saw what they did against the Thunder. Now, if they do it again against the Nuggets on the road in Denver, people are going to start to realize this Minnesota team. Don't look at them in the seedings and think that they can't do some crazy things in the playoffs.
absolutely. Yeah, for me, I think it's a team that can beat just about anyone in one series. Now, do they have the offensive firepower to win 4 straight rounds and win the title? I would say probably not, and that's probably why we have them at 9. But when you look at like the ceiling for this team and what could happen in just one series, like they have all the pieces if they just put them together. By the way, DiVincenzo post All-Star break, 51.7% from three. You're right
Yeah,
about him
wow.
making everything that he looks at. But yeah, this Minnesota team I think is scary, and I don't think it's disparaging the Thunder to say this because first of all, it speaks to the depth of the league and just how much talent we have now and how really anybody can beat anybody. Um, but I don't know. I think Minnesota can absolutely pull off something crazy if they get in the right scenario. Let's go to number 8. Who do you got?
This one again, everything for me between kind of 5 and 10 was tough because we're picking hairs here. I had a really tough time with 7 and 8, but 8 I went with the Knicks.
Okay, I mean, did you look at my sheet before this?
I'm guessing we have the same 7 too, but we'll get into that later. The
Okay.
Knicks thing, if they could have just shown us like one or two quality games against the top teams, I would feel so differently about this team because their group mentality, those 5 guys that they start with, I have so much faith in their resolve and their resilience. And they haven't shown us that against the top teams, and they don't seem like they match up well against the top teams. But my whole thing is like you put those guys against anybody, I feel like they're just not gonna quit. That doesn't mean they're gonna win, but I can't quit this group for some reason. And the Brunson injury, it sucks that he went down like that, and it sucks that they're going to be without him for a while. But also, they need to learn how to play without him. Like they rely on him. They get into these modes where Brunson kind of just does everything for them. And that Kings game, yesterday or 2 days ago, was kind of I feel like what they needed. The ball starts moving again. They're like, oh yeah, this is. We can also run our offense without him, and we can play defense without him. And Josh Hart made a joke after the game that oh, your guy's defense looks better. And he said, oh, yeah, because Jalen's not out there. And obviously that's because they're best buds and they can say those kinds of things and be honest. But there is some truth to that. Now they can kind of find a different identity. And maybe this will spark them for, by the way, the other thing, Jordan, I really quickly want to say is these guys, obviously Thibodeau runs them so hard. And as a Bulls fan, I've seen this personally. We've all seen it. And I feel like Brunson needed a break.
Yeah.
So I feel like that could be a blessing in disguise for them before the playoffs. But what do you think about the Knicks?
I mean, yeah, you're totally right about the minutes running them into the ground. I think their starting five has played like hundreds more minutes than the next closest starting five. It's incredible. But yeah, I mean, they're fifth in offensive rating. This team, like you said, is incredibly talented. They're very connected. Like this is a legit special offense. They're 14th in defensive rating, so not good on that end. And then, like you said, against the top teams, they're 6-12 against the top 10 teams in point differential, so haven't fared well in those matchups. But the main reason for me why I have them here, they're 0-3 against the Celtics, and they've lost by an average of 21 points in those games. And I normally wouldn't make it about one matchup, but the problem is the way the seeding's going to work out, they are going to have to play the Celtics unless there's a first round upset. I mean, those two are pretty much locked into the 2 and 3 seed. And it might be the worst single matchup like across the playoffs. When you look at like one team matching up with another, I don't think the Knicks have a chance in that matchup. The mismatch hunting of Boston with Cat and Brunson, like it's Tatum's living in like a fairy tale. It's his dream. He's so happy to play the Knicks every time they come to town. I honestly think like if they were on the other side of the bracket, if they had to play Cleveland in round two, and then they could hope that Milwaukee knocked off the Celtics and then they would meet Milwaukee in the conference finals, maybe I could think about having them higher. I can't see this team beating the Celtics in a series, and I think they've absolutely had a great season. They made themselves better from last season, but I think they may have given themselves a worse chance to beat the Celtics specifically. And when you're in this East, when it's the year of the Celtics having this roster, like you kind of got to build a roster to get through them, and I don't think they've done that. So that's why I have them this low. What do you think about that matchup, though? I mean, I feel like it's pretty clear, right?
It does seem pretty clear now. My memory is terrible, and I wonder if there's ever been an instance, maybe in recent memory, where a team looked so dominant against another team in the regular season, and we all expected one thing to happen, and then it flipped in the playoffs. Off the top of my head, I don't remember that
I don't
happening.
either. I
I
remember
guess
last year Phoenix
Minnesota
beat
Phoenix.
Minnesota
Yeah.
Phoenix is what I was gonna say, but I feel like it's different. I don't know. I don't remember quite what the records were or what those matchups looked like. But this Celtics thing to me, it it fits perfectly into how the Celtics play with their mismatch hunting.
Yeah, and that one, I don't know, those games, from what I remember from those games in the regular season last year, felt a little different than this. This just feels like, no offense to the Knicks fans, but it feels like big brother, little brother every time they play. And as you mentioned, Tatum just, every time he sees Cat on the floor, it's just a pick and roll and just going at him on defense. The other thing about the Knicks right now is 4 through 6 in the East are in a virtual tie. Pistons, Pacers, Bucks. So, we've already heard people say, oh, the Pistons could give them a run for their money, and they definitely could. They might end up with Giannis and the Bucks or an Indiana team that has a ton of confidence after what they did last year to them in the playoffs. So no first round matchup is going to be easy for the Knicks either. It's going to be that, by the way, that might be the best first round series, Knicks versus whoever.
Yeah.
So looking forward to
Absolutely, yeah.
that.
Totally agree. It's a really fun team. It's a damn good team. They just need to improve that defense. Mitchell Robinson coming back, people had a lot of hope for. I don't know if that's quite enough to turn around this defense, and I also don't think you're really going to close a lot with Mitch and Cat on the floor together. So, we'll see. Maybe they can prove us wrong. Maybe they can improve that defense. But for now, I think we got them in the right spot. Who do you have at 7?
I have Milwaukee at 7.
All right, you were correct. We have the same number 7 as well.
I'm actually really surprised because I was picking hairs so much. I'm surprised that we have the exact same order right now. But yes, Milwaukee is my 7. What do you think about the Bucks?
Um, Yeah, I mean, first of all, tough loss last night to the Pacers. I watched that this morning. Crazy final play. Pacers running some football plays. That was cool. I think this Middleton trade, I got totally wrong at the deadline. I thought, it hindered their ceiling with trading Middleton. I thought they needed his playmaking and his offense to really reach that level. I wasn't super high on Kuzma, but I think Kuzma's fit with this team has been pretty much exactly what you could have hoped for. They are now fifth in defensive rating over the last 15 games. They're also sixth in pace over that span. I mean, it's just kind of a different team than we saw earlier in the year. And it's not like it's levels better, but I do think they are better than they were earlier in the year. The offense hasn't been quite as good since the deadline, but I think when you get Dame and Giannis in a playoff setting, they have the requisite shooting. I mean, I think, what are they? They're third in the NBA in 3-point percentage. This team is going to be scary. Gary Trent having a good year now, had a tough start. Torian Prince really starting to shoot the ball well. I mean, but the big thing to me is like, I think, like I mentioned with Kuzma's fit, he's been great cutting. He's been great defensively. He's been great on the break. He does still make some, out of control drives and turnovers, and he makes mistakes. He takes dumb shots, sure, but it's like an influx of athleticism and youth and defense and hustle that this team needed so desperately. What have you thought of Kuzma's fit with the team?
Everything that you said, Jordan, I feel the exact same way about him. Now, just nitpicking yesterday, I felt like I was watching yesterday's game and I was like, man, I wish Kuzma could give him like 15 to 16 points rather
100%.
than like I feel like there's still those kind of nitpicky things with him, but isn't that where Bobby Portis comes in? Isn't that where they're missing? I feel like this team, if they were in the finals, I'm not going to be shocked at all. Like you have the best player in the conference. Dame has been much more consistent this season. I'm pulling up his stats right now. He is averaging a point more than he was last year, but it just feels like watching Dame on a night-to-night basis this year compared to last. It feels like he is more just consistent and reliable. And it felt like last year Dame had a couple of those nights where you look and he's 3 for 13 and he finished with 13 points. And it's like, we need Dame to have 24 every night. And it feels like with them this season, that's the case. And then, of course, as you mentioned, their trade deadline additions and even their offseason additions. Torian Prince has become one of the best shooters in the league, and he's basically knocked down from the corners. Gary Trent Jr., every time he shoots, similar to DiVincenzo, I feel like it's going in. And then adding Jericho Sims to the second unit along with KPJ has actually been really good. Of course, the Kuzma addition. They've done a really good job filling out that roster next to Giannis. Now, the biggest thing with the Bucks to me is like their window is it can't be for next year because even with this year, I was kind of expecting a Dame regression, which didn't happen. And then, of course, Brooke Lopez, at some point, we would think is going to regress. He's been so unbelievable, by the way, for his longevity. I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough, but their time is right now. Like, if they don't win this year, I'm very scared about what the future holds for this group. And even with Giannis entering his 30s, but I feel like you match them up against anybody in the East, and they have a puncher's chance for sure, even against the Bostons and the Clevelands. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat them.
Absolutely a puncher's chance team. Dame has been incredible. The efficiency, I think his playmaking has been ridiculous this year. I think he's looked a lot more comfortable next to Giannis and playing, in that two-man game and just being on the court together with another, superstar like that. It looked a little clunky last year. It's looked awesome this year. Also, Giannis hurt his calf like I don't know what before the All-Star break. He missed a little stretch there. Before that stretch, like that was the best version of Giannis that we've ever seen. Scoring, playmaking, his defense wasn't quite like defensive player of the year level, but you saw him like when there were big games, he can turn it on and he can get to that level. So you have the best version of Giannis Antetokounmpo. You have a really good version of Dame, and now you have like just more balance than you did before, right? You're good on both sides of the ball. I still think like defensively there are holes. Brook, you mentioned he's been great. He has been great offensively. I still think like he's a guy when you drag him out to the perimeter, it's just a blow by, and it's they're very limited with what they can do with him on defense. Dame is not a good defender as well. So there are holes, and the offense like we said, Kuzma's not the ideal third option. He's not giving you as much scoring punch as you would like, but I think if this team can put it together for a series, they can absolutely knock anybody out, especially with this shooting that they have now around Giannis. What a great way to build around him. All right, let's go to number 6. This is where it gets fun.
Number 6, I had the Golden State Warriors.
Me as well. I wonder if we're gonna go 10 for 10 here. No way,
I
right?
think, well, I don't know if we're going to go 10 for 10 because
Yeah,
I
it
got
gets
the
crazy.
goal.
The top three get a little tough, I feel like.
Yes, I did have Golden State at 6. Now, I feel like for me personally, this is a team that I try to watch every game of. I really enjoy watching them play, and I feel like the biggest difference with them recently, very recently, besides the obvious Jimmy Butler stuff, has been Moses Moody as a point of attack defender, really actually disrupting guys. And that was kind of the piece that was really concerning me is who's going to step up and be that guy that just guards the other team's best players. And I feel like now that they feel comfortable with Moody in that role, I would imagine we don't know with Steve Kerr, but I would imagine he would stay in that starting spot when Kuminga comes back tomorrow, and that would kind of give them some balance. I love what Moody's given them. Also, last game we see GP2 has a career high in points. We see Guy Santos has been playing really well off the bench. Quinn Post, who by the way I think last game had 4 or 5 blocks. So they're infusing. I don't know if this is a Jimmy effect or what it is, but they've infused defense into it. The biggest thing that concerns me with the Warriors in a playoff setting, especially against a team like the Lakers or even like OKC, is what do they do when Steph gets hunted on defense? And that's kind of where I couldn't put them above some of the other West teams because as I love Steph. Steph might be my favorite non-Chicago Bull ever, but I do get concerned about him on the defensive end when every possession, if they play Luka or LeBron, they're gonna set a screen and try to get Curry in the action on every play.
Yeah, so I mean obviously we have them in the same spot, but I have a different concern. I mean, I think, you're right about Steph and what the Lakers will try to do, what really every team will try to do, but I think this team has a good enough defense around him with Draymond, with Jimmy, with Moody, like you mentioned, Gary Payton off the bench. I mean, they have a bunch of athletes. Draymond is obviously one of the smartest, best defenders ever. Jimmy is elite when he wants to be on that end. And honestly, I think Steph is he's a fine defender. I don't think he's, like a Damian Lillard or a Trae Young in terms of hunting season. I'll give you some stats. 12-2 since Jimmy arrived. Pre-All-Star break, 17th in offensive rating, ninth in defensive rating. In their last 15, they're fifth in offensive rating and fourth in defensive rating. So like you said, Jimmy, changed them, completely changed them. This offense before the trade was unbearable at times. It was, so hard to watch them try and get Steph the ball, him get doubled, pass it, then give it back, him get doubled again, and then he's chucking up some 30-foot step back, at the shot clock buzzer. And when teams didn't have to worry about anybody else, it was easy to guard them. Now Jimmy's here. He's brought this influx of playmaking, of IQ, and of shot making. And I think, when you had such like an obvious need at that like second option spot, like they have good role players. They have, Draymond as the anchor of a defense. Steph is the superstar. They just desperately needed that second option. You bring in Jimmy, I think it's a perfect fit. You know, I think they have good depth. I think they have a lot of guys who can fill specific needs depending on situation. And I think that's a luxury, even though, like we mentioned with Memphis, maybe it's not the most important thing in the playoffs. But for me, my main issue is still the shooting. Like I look around this team, they are second in 3-point attempts over their last 15 games, but they're only shooting it at 35%, which is 19th in the league over that span. So, the offensive ceiling for this team, although it is a Steph Curry led group, I think it's a little bit lower than where you'd like it to be for like a true championship contender. So that's my issue with them. I think this defense is legit. And it might be a little strange fitting Kuminga back in. He's not like the easiest guy to fit in. We've seen that before. Like you said, I don't think he'll start, but he is, the good version of Kuminga is a really good bench scorer, athlete, energy kind of guy. So I really like the Warriors. I think this is a team that honestly, like, over the next month could move up in these rankings and we could get to playoff time and be like, oh my God, they're right there.
Yes, I also could see a little bit of the opposite. I hate to do that because they've been playing so well, but I just wonder what would happen if they played a young and athletic team like Minnesota in a playoff setting. Like I don't know who I would take in that setting. You mentioned the shooting being a concern. I believe they are 12-1 when Buddy scores 18 or more.
The
So
Buddy stuff is unbelievable.
a lot of their shooting is just literally like, did Buddy make his shots tonight? Which is hilarious. How kind of important he's become to that team. And that's the other thing about it. We mentioned this with Memphis is like they have a lot of depth. And now Kuminga's going to be back. And by the way, Podziemski's been out for a little bit here. So when everybody's healthy, who are going to be the odd men out in that rotation? And you mentioned Jordan, they have a lot of guys that you can plug and play in certain scenarios. So let's say, for example, a certain game doesn't call for Buddy Hield, but then maybe the next game does. Is he going to be in rhythm and ready to perform in a moment's notice? Same thing with GP2, same thing with Guy Santos. The depth thing is a great thing to have, but also if it comes at the expense of like a guy's rhythm or a flow, it kind of concerns me. And this Warriors team is another example of that where I feel like they have like 11 or 12 guys that could be in a rotation, but you're going to probably trim that down to like 8 or 9. It'll be interesting to see how Kerr manages that. Even
It's
a Looney.
Yeah, absolutely. Like in a series against Minnesota, who has a ton of size, you would probably see a bunch of Looney. Like if they played OKC and OKC's going double big, maybe you do see a lot of Looney. But then, against Memphis or somebody else, I don't know, maybe not. Um, yeah, I think that there is a ceiling here where if we get like superstar Jimmy Butler or if Steph just goes nuts, like they could get this offense to the point where it needs to be where they can really really go on a run. But I think it's just asking a lot for to see that kind of jump as we get to the playoffs. We are going to get kicked out of this Zoom here because I don't have Zoom Premium. We will take a quick break. We'll be right back for the top five. All right, we are back and we are on to our top five. Let's go to number five, Armani.
This is going to be a shocker for people. The Chicago Bulls. No, I'm just kidding. No, this is where I have the Lakers. The Lakers are my fifth.
Okay, this is our first disagreement. I have the Nuggets here. Tell me why you have Nuggets over Lakers, and we'll get into it.
That game was a great showing by the Lakers, but it was one game, and I still feel like the Nuggets in a series, if that was game one of a best of seven series, and the Joker was being guarded like that, being fronted, and by the way, kudos to JJ, kudos to the Lakers for how they game planned against him, because they really did make life difficult, and it's been a model for other teams to use in guarding the Joker. But I just feel like if that was a best of seven, and that was game one, the Joker would have adjusted and had 40 the next game because he's the best player on the planet. I feel like that me saying all this is discrediting the Luka LeBron stuff, and it's not meant to. I don't think the Lakers have zero chance. I would give them maybe a 45% chance against the Nuggets, but I still would take Denver over the Lakers if that is the path that they cross each other in the playoffs. With that being said, I would love to see it. That would be incredible TV if they do match up with the
Yeah.
history that they've had.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that game plan. And I think, Redick admitted that he and the staff spent so much time preparing for that game, and we have no idea, what the Nuggets were thinking going in, if they even had like a real game plan going in, if they're like, you know what, we'll just be ourselves. So it was totally like the Lakers punching them in the mouth, treating it like a game seven, and the Nuggets maybe just not quite being ready for that type of intensity and that type of game plan. Um, with that said, though, I think the Nuggets have shown a little bit of chinks in the armor recently, and I agree. Jokic is the best player in the world, 1,000%. This offense to me is when they have Gordon in the lineup and they're fully healthy. I think it might be the most unstoppable offense in the league, especially in the half court. Like if you get in a half court execution battle with this team, they're just going to generate good shots more than you are, and they're probably going to come out on top. But I'm worried about the defense. They're 20th in defensive rating now. They've slipped that far. Jokic hasn't been great on that end this year, and I think a lot of that is, it's partly effort. It's partly like he has to do so much on offense, and these games night to night don't matter all that much. So he, isn't giving 100% effort on that end. But I look at the rest of their personnel, like they don't have a single elite point of attack defender like you talked about with the Warriors. Christian Brown is good. He's fine, but he's not the guy that you want guarding Shea. He's not the guy that you want guarding Edwards or Luca or LeBron or whoever it is. I think, healthy Aaron Gordon maybe helps a little bit of the defense, and it's been tough with him being in and out of the lineup. So I think, 5-4 with the Lakers and the Nuggets was the toughest switch or decision for me. The Nuggets also are 5-13 against the top 10 teams in point differential. Like I think that's got to mean something if they're not playing great against these good teams. But I'll got to give them a little flowers here, and we got to talk Jokic because this is absolutely incredible what's going on with him. They are plus 23.1 points per 100 possessions with Jokic on the court. It's like unheard of stuff. Their defense is actually about a point worse, but their offense is 24.3 points better per 100. It's one of the best offensive seasons that we've ever seen. He's one of the best offensive players that we've ever seen. Jamal Murray's been excellent after a slow start. He's up to 25, 6, and 58.6% true shooting. I think this two-man game between them is still one of the most unstoppable actions in the league. But I'm worried about the defense, and I do think that blueprint that JJ showed, like the Nuggets haven't really shown an ability to combat it. The Kings did it to them. The Celtics did it to them. Obviously, they lost to the Kings, or excuse me, they lost to the Celtics. They beat the Kings, but the Kings did a good job on Jokic. Like they legitimately limited him. So that seems to be like the Nuggets haven't had a counterpunch for that. So I'm really interested to see, where that is going to go in the playoffs.
Those are all great points. Now, personally, I have this. I understand the record against the top teams is not where we would want it to be. I think you said 5-13. I still have this unhealthy obsession with the Nuggets and what their ceiling can be, and I I I don't know. I can't quit the Nuggets. The biggest thing with the Nuggets though is if Aaron Gordon's calf is not right, and this has been something he's been dealing with literally since the beginning of the season, that changes my opinion completely because I feel like he is so necessary for them to reach that final form. But yeah, we
Yeah,
are going
100%.
to
I can't
disagree.
blame you at all for having them above the Lakers. I mean, the ceiling with this team's offense is it's sky high. Like I said, it is potentially the best offense in the league when they're rolling and they're healthy. And yeah, they do need to get Gordon back. So let's go to the Lakers now. They're 9-3 with Luca and LeBron playing. The crazy thing though is the defense. Number 2 defensive rating over the last 15. The Finney Smith trade's been huge. Gabe Vincent has really stepped up on that end. Vanderbilt's been great, and LeBron going from a guy who needed a sabbatical early in the season to being this elite. JJ Redick called him an all NBA level defender. And then, of course, JJ and the staff doing a great job coaching this team up despite some, personnel weaknesses with center, with Jackson Hayes being their starting center. But where are you at with the Lakers and what we've seen from this defense?
what I would have said about the Lakers would have been completely different if we did this right before the Celtics game and LeBron's groin injury.
True.
Now, that defense, I don't understand when people are still not believing. I understand the personnel is different for an elite defense with 40-year-old LeBron and Luka Doncic, but everything we've seen from their defense shows us that it is real and that it might be because of JJ, it might be because of a combination of JJ and the personnel. I've just loved what Pelinka has done on the margins on this roster. Guys like Jordan Goodwin, you mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith, now Vanderbilt's back. They have a recipe that can easily lead them to the NBA Finals. It's just going to be a question of do they have enough? I think with the rim protection stuff is my only real concern. But the interesting thing about all that and that discussion is 2020, everybody was saying, oh, the Lakers, they're going to this too big thing. And that doesn't work in the modern NBA because, you kind of have to be flexible. And they kind of zag this way. Now in 2025, 5 years later, they're kind of zagging again and saying, well, we'll just use LeBron as our backup five, or we'll use Vanderbilt as our backup five, and that we don't really care. Maybe they'll use Trey Jemison, who knows? But the point is, like, they're zagging again, and they might be ahead of the curve again. We saw the game against the Nuggets. It didn't really matter that they didn't have a Jokic counter with a traditional big. They they might have the scheming and the coaching to figure it out all the way up until the finals. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, going back to the Nuggets real quick, like daring the Nuggets to shoot, I think, in that game and just fully committing to to limiting Jokic's touches the way they did. Like not just hey, let's commit everything to Jokic and let's not let him score. It's let's not let him touch the freaking ball the whole game. Like it was absolutely incredible. And of course, like you need some cooperation from Denver's role players, like to not shoot the lights out. And Denver actually like the role players shot fine in that game. But when you don't get, your superstar Nikola Jokic the ball, is going to be tough to win. And for the Lakers, the big thing for me is like they have been this good since the trade, and Luka hasn't even been himself. Like Luka
Yeah.
looks like a diminished version of himself, and you might think that's a really big issue. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to count on Luka to look like this in the playoffs. Like I think he's going to get to a different level. He's working off a calf injury. He got traded from a franchise that he thought he would be there for his entire life. Like his world is turned upside down right now, and he like is also working off a calf injury. So if Luka gets back to Luka, I think this is the biggest threat to OKC in the West. The size of Luka, LeBron, Rui when he's healthy, and attacking like guys on OKC who are elite defenders, but a little bit smaller and not a great matchup for OKC. So also having Reeves like as a third option, what a luxury. A guy who just gets buckets when other guys don't have it, can absolutely take over games and turn the tides when they need him to. So I think the offense should and will be better as Luka, starts to get his legs under him. And you mentioned the LeBron injury. Obviously it depends on the severity of the injury, but as long as he can be healthy for playoffs, that's all that matters to me. Like it's not like he needs to play this next month at a really high level for me to believe in LeBron. I think they got to get him right for playoffs, and they'll be good. And maybe with LeBron out of the lineup, Luka starts to take over a little bit and start to feel it a little bit. So I still believe in this offense getting to a really high level, and I still believe in Luka getting back to where he was last year. Do you think that?
If Luka's making his shots, as we've seen, like this offense is going to be insane.
Yeah,
And it's really, I shouldn't even say if, it's when he starts making his shots, the offense is going to be insane. And the best thing, similar to the Knicks thing with the Brunson injury, for Luka to get, quote unquote in shape, now he's going to be double teamed and blitzed relentlessly with LeBron out for the next week or two. So this is kind of going to be a boot camp for Luka to get back
absolutely.
into
That's a
his
good point.
tip-top
Yeah.
shape. So, I mean, the injury sucks, and of course, hopefully it doesn't linger when LeBron comes back. But yeah, for Luka's sake, I think this was a blessing in disguise to get him back to being Luka. And by the way, Jordan, we don't know what the Lakers are until we see Luka be Luka, because when Luka is Luka, their ceiling might be a lot higher than even we realize. So I
100%.
can't
I
wait to see
think the
it.
numbers, like it almost says the opposite of what we think of this team. Like I think their defense is good, like you said. I don't think they're the second best defense in the league, which is what they have been. They were the number one defense, for a stretch there. I think they're more like maybe a top 10 defense, but yeah.
I do have one Lakers concern though that we didn't mention, and that's Hachimura's injury because
Okay.
that injury is a very strange sounding one, and it's a knee thing, and
Yeah.
I know that they said he's going to be reevaluated here soon, and they expect him to return probably within the next 2 weeks, I would assume. But that one kind of gave me even more hesitation than the LeBron one because I think Rui is actually necessary for them to be their best version. Similar to, in a ways, to Aaron Gordon being necessary for the Nuggets. I think they need Rui.
I
So
totally agree. Rui's been amazing in that role, like being the guy attacking off closeouts, the guy that has to hit the open shots when Luka and LeBron draw all the help, and he's been great. Attacking and being a good offensive player in that role. All right, let's go to where it gets really hard. The top three for me, like everything we've talked about so far is fun and it's great. To me, it's these three teams and everybody else. I don't know if you echo that sentiment, but let me know. Who do you have in three?
Well, this is where I am going to get roasted, but I actually had the Nuggets in three. I had OKC
Oh,
in
okay,
four,
okay. You have
but
OKC at four.
I have OKC at four.
Okay,
And
let's talk about that.
yes, it was really hard to differentiate between those. For me, for those four was really tough because right now for me, I think in terms of tiers, it goes top four, which obviously I include the Nuggets in that. I know a lot of people wouldn't.
I would
And
not,
then
yeah.
the next tier for me is like maybe Lakers, Warriors by themselves, which they're like right on the fringe of that, but not quite. And then of course the other four. But for me, the Thunder thing is just really I feel like two things. I don't know if Chet is ready yet to give them offensively what they're going to need from him in the playoffs. And also, I feel like they just get a little bit too SGA reliant still. As good as their defense is and as good as the other guys have gotten, Aaron Wiggins is incredible. Case and Wallace, they're going to dare Lou Dort to make shots, but I think that he is going to make shots, as we saw on the other night on Monday against the Nuggets. He hit like 8 threes, I feel
That
like.
was ridiculous. He was like 8 for 14, something stupid, yeah.
The strategy against the Thunder is going to be, hey, dare Caruso to hit shots, dare Dort to make shots. But I feel like that's not going to work. I just feel like their offense is still a little bit too SGA reliant for me. I would love to be proven wrong. I feel like I will be proven wrong in the playoffs. But when it comes down to it, for me, I'm still taking the Denver Nuggets in a best of seven, probably in 7 games. That would be on the road against the Thunder. That's how I
Okay.
feel.
This is our first big disagreement. I could not see the Nuggets beating this team. I mean, I think the Thunder are like I think this defense is generationally good. Like unbelievable all-time great defense. Just waves of athletes everywhere you look, switchable, tough, hard-nosed. The collective, I've never seen a team with like collectively such good hands. Every guy gets a deflection, strips it as the guy's going up, gets a block where he should get a foul usually. It's like they just get their hands on the ball all the time. And of course, they're just incredibly athletic and can stay in front of everybody and contain the ball better than any other team and force turnovers and get out on the break. So I think this defense is unbelievable. And then on offense, I agree. Like most of the things I wrote down about the Thunder are concerns because the offense does have real concerns, and we all know how good the defense is, so why talk about it that much? But let's get into like this offense and what could go wrong. So you mentioned the 3-point shooting and what the strategy would be. Two games where they looked the most beatable to me this year were the Milwaukee NBA Cup game and the Minnesota game, the first one where they lost 116 to 101. Both of those games, OKC shot 5 of 32 against Milwaukee. They shot 12 of 46 from three against Minnesota. And on top of that, Shea had a pretty inefficient night. So the plan against them is to have like your best defender just make it their life's mission to make it tough on Shea. So in those games, it was Jalen Clark, it was Jaden McDaniels, and for the Bucks, it was Andre Jackson Jr., who did an excellent job in that game. Just get the ball out of his hands, force him to make tough shots, and force him to be like a playmaker and see if those other guys can beat you. And in those games, they didn't. You're absolutely right about that. So this offense can get got. Like it legitimately can. The thing is like when Shea is going, which is most nights, like it is he's become this unstoppable shot maker and scorer and finisher. You have to send two guys or you have to send help, and then they're getting these wide open shots. And I think to just think that the role players are going to miss is a little bit of wishful thinking. Like I get it because that did happen in those two games, and that is going to be the strategy. Um, and I think maybe like I have them coming out of the West. I think that could be the thing that holds them back from winning the whole thing. But I don't think in the West, I don't see them getting knocked out.
This is going to be the take I can already feel that I regret the most, but I'm sticking with it. And part of it is because it's not even to me about the Thunder. It's about what I think the Nuggets, especially offensively. I feel like their defense, by the way, with Denver is going to be fine, especially with this stat could be wrong, but I swear I think I saw this stat about Zeke Naji having the best defensive rating in the month of February. Again, could be wrong, but I could have sworn I saw that on the Nuggets telecast. Then you add in Peyton Watson finally back, and we saw his impact on Monday night. And then I feel like another big aspect to their defense is going to be Strother being out of the lineup, allowing Pickett to be in the rotation. I know these are like, who cares? These guys are not going to be relevant, but I
No,
feel
that's
like
an interesting take. Is that like Strother going down actually is kind of good because they need Pickett's defense. Yeah.
yes, and I feel like you mix in all those bench guys along with the guys that can provide offense in the starting unit. I feel like they have a great balance. And then at the end of games, you mentioned it, Jordan, they have the best. Well, I don't know if you said the best, but to me, it's the best option at the end of a game, which is the last 6 minutes. You know what's coming. The two-man game with Murray and Jokic, and Murray's averaging like 26 points over his last 10 games, I think, with 50% from three. All this talk about him being washed and he's playing like this is just it's ridiculous. He's as good, if not better, than he was when they won the championship. And I
He's
think that's
better. He's better. This is the best he's ever been. Yeah.
so, I mean, we've already seen them do it. They're battle tested. They've done it before. And I feel like them kind of having this chip on their shoulder, Nicola going for this eternal, like all-time great, like he's got that to play for. I, again, I could be totally wrong. The Thunder are so good that, could look like an idiot in a few months when they just destroy everybody. But I'm rolling with the Nuggets.
No, I think that series would be incredible, and we just saw like a mini version of it over this last week. That first game, like they have the Nuggets have nothing for Shea. They have literally nothing. They had to in this second game resort to blitzing him with two guys at the top of his zone and being like, "Yeah, we'd rather play 4-on-3 with the rest of your guys than play straight up with Shea. Like we just don't want him to have the ball." And of course, the Nuggets win that game, but they win that game because they scored 140, not because they could
Yeah.
stop the Thunder, and because guys like Russell Westbrook, Peyton Watson, Pickett had a good game on offense. Like these are guys that are unreliable shooters as you get into like these crunch time games. And they had the big game last night. I just think in a 7 game series, like the Thunder are going to be able to win because the Nuggets have nothing to stop this offense. The way to beat OKC is you have to make their offense like instead of a top five offense, make it like a middle of the road offense. And I don't think the Nuggets have any chance of doing that. So the Thunder, I mean, both teams are awesome. That what did you think of those matchups though? Because those were really interesting little like mini case studies.
It was great. I mean, Sunday was the announcers kept bringing it up. The Jokic elbow, I really felt like it affected his jumper.
I agree.
And then Monday for the Nuggets to come back. Now, the Monday thing was strange. Of course, the Nuggets didn't have Gordon, and then it really does in a matchup like that. It really does come down to those few minutes where SGA and Jokic are sitting at the same time, and then for the Thunder to not have J Dub in those minutes, they need J Dub in those minutes. So it's
That's true.
kind of hard to gauge, but the fact that the Nuggets got one and got a win against a good team, which, as you said, they haven't done a lot of this season, I think was big for that team's overall psyche and confidence level. And
Yeah.
again, tonight they match up with the Wolves, so we'll see if they can actually carry that confidence and beat another good team.
Yeah. Well, we didn't actually talk enough about J Dub because we're talking about the 3-point shooters. I've been called dumb in my comments all year for saying that about, their 3-point shooters maybe not being the best. The main concern I would say that people have with the Thunder is that Jalen Williams is this super young and inexperienced guy as their second option. I mean, he's been very good as of late. We saw last year in the playoffs, he didn't quite live up to what they needed him to be. He still, to me, has like a pretty big reliance on like tough shot making and fadeaways and tough twos in the mid range. I think he's very good. That is another concern for me, though. Are you concerned about J-Dub at all?
I'm more concerned with the Chet part of it because I feel
Okay.
like they need Chet's offense a, a little less than J-Dub, but they still need Chet's offense. I feel like J-Dub last year was his learning experience, especially in the playoffs, the second round against Dallas. I felt like it wasn't what they needed, and he kind of that was the year, okay, I don't know what his final stats were in that series, but okay, we need 23 from you every night instead of probably 18 to 19. I feel like that was his learning curve, and now he's got the All-Star under his belt. I'm not really concerned about him. I am concerned about this hip thing that he's dealing with, though, that
Yeah.
Bagnall said is without a timetable for return. Um, that I'm not concerned about him, though, in terms of giving them what they need from him offensively or defensively.
You're more concerned about when teams get the ball out of Shea's hands, when they get it out of J-Dub's hands, what can these other guys do? Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, I
Yeah.
think that's a very fair criticism. I just I can't believe in this Nuggets defense yet, or maybe ever. But all right, let's move on. That's gonna be a crazy matchup if we see it. So what was that? Was that three? You had the Nuggets at three.
OKC was my four, Denver was my three.
Okay, so I'll talk about my number three, which is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Every metric, like like I said, for me, you had it tiered differently. I have the Celtics, the Cavs, and the Thunder as my top three, and then everyone else. And you're really like for me, this is really hard to rank these three. You are splitting hairs, picking nits with every little thing that you say about these teams. But every metric that you look at says that this is the best offense. They're the number one offensive rating. They're number one in 3-point shooting at 39%. They're unreal in transition. All of their depth guys shoot the hell out of the ball and can create on offense. Ty Jerome has been a revelation, one of the most fun stories of this season. Garland and Mobley obviously making huge leaps is the big story. But if we're gonna pick nits, like the reason I have them at three and not two or one, I do have slight concerns about their defense and having like little entry points with two small guards as your stars with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Sam Merrill, Max Strus maybe can't guard big wings like they're gonna have to against the Celtics. So I have them three. Do you have them two?
I have a 1A, 1B.
Who's one A?
So, well, I mean, I have the Celtics as 1A technically, and I have
Okay.
the Cavs as 1B.
Okay, gotcha.
Well,
What's that?
Jordan, what you mentioned about their offense and all their metrics offensively, that's exactly what we said about the Celtics last year. And everybody was like, well, let's see if it translates to the postseason. And all the evidence was in front of us the whole season. And I get it. Yes, you still have to prove it in the playoffs. I just don't see how that offense is not going to translate to the playoffs. And then defensively, I understand the concerns, but I feel like with the two bigs behind them, behind the two guards, and you add Hunter. I think they're second in defensive rating since the All-Star break. Is that I don't know if I'm terrible at fact
I don't
checking,
know,
but
but that's really good if so.
I feel like their defense has turned a corner here, especially recently, and I feel like they have enough defense to go along with that insane offense to beat anybody in the league and to go all the way. It all comes down to though what you said. When Garland and Mitchell are hunted, will they be able to survive on that end of the floor? Which to me, that's why I have it as 1A, 1B. I don't know who to pick in a series. Well, I do know who I would pick. I would pick the champs, but um not confidently. I wouldn't pick the champs confidently
I
against the Cavs.
totally agree. I'm a Celtics fan and I am deathly terrified of this Cavs team. You're right. They are the second defensive rating in the league since the All-Star break, and they are number seven defensive rating on the season. The thing is, like I said, we're splitting hairs here. When I look at that Celtics matchup specifically, you look at their most recent game, the Cavs won. And people are going to call me crazy for using this game as like an example in the Celtics favor, but Tatum was that was one of the best games he's ever played. And Tatum is the best version of himself right now in terms of his playmaking, his shot making, his, Swiss Army stuff. Like he's just put it all together finally, and he's been the player that Celtics fans have wanted to see. Um, so, you can hunt Garland and Brown, or excuse me, you can hunt Garland and Mitchell with Tatum and Brown. And then Tatum was like dragging Evan Mobley out on the perimeter and taking him to the rack. Like that was insane. That he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year. Tatum was going at him comfortably and finishing. The reason I bring that game up is because they lost without Drew or KP in the lineup. And what that meant was Cornette got a lot of minutes, Sam Hauser got a lot of minutes. And like you said, this offense is unbelievable. I have no concerns about this Cleveland offense. This is going to translate to the playoffs 100%. And they went at Cornette all game. Cornette also screws up the Celtics spacing a little bit on offense, but they went at Cornette, they went at Hauser, and they made more plays down the stretch to win that game. I just think, the Celtics fully healthy, they can really go at some guys on Cleveland. And I think they have enough switchability. And I think the Celtics have an elite defense where they're the most complete team to me on both ends. But the thing that the Cavs have going for them is that Donovan Mitchell is just out of his mind when he plays the Celtics. Like he just passed Michael Jordan for the most points per game against the Celtics in a career. He's at like 35 a game. It's ridiculous.
He loves it. And Jordan, I'm so glad you mentioned those Tatum possessions against Mobley because I don't think that's an accident at all. I think the Celtics and Tatum specifically was like, look, we're going to hunt the mismatch. And by the way, every single one of you is a mismatch to me.
Yeah.
Even your defensive player of the year over there, he's a mismatch to me too. And watch this. I'm going to get him on the island. I think there was a lot of kind of alpha dog type of energy from Tatum in that matchup that you mentioned it. I mean, Hauser and Cornette and those guys, fully healthy Celtics, we're probably not going to be seeing that much of them against a Cleveland team that likes to do the same thing. So, but yeah,
Cornette
it's
can't play against Cleveland, just straight up. Like if they have to play Cornette real minutes, he's gonna get destroyed. Hauser will obviously play, but you won't have to close with him, and that's what happened. Was down the stretch they were just going at him. So
yeah, I completely agree. With that being said, uh, with Cleveland, Sunday they play Milwaukee, a Milwaukee team that was on the second night of a back-to-back and definitely wanting to still prove something in a possible second round matchup. And Cleveland gets a bad offensive game from Garland and from Mitchell. And it's just that's how good this team is. They can play them 30 minutes. They can just rotate guys in and out. You mentioned Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome is unbelievable. Feel like if he's not 50, 40, 90 on the season, he's very close to it. And then they haven't lost with DeAndre Hunter yet. And even other guys like the ball, this team, first of all, the Celtics also remind me of this, but we grew up talking about the 2014 Spurs and the way that they're synonymous with the ball movement and the extra pass and all that stuff. The Celtics were great at that last year and they still are, but Cleveland does the same exact stuff where it's just like guy gets into the paint, guy sprays it to the weak side, guy makes an extra pass, and it just flows like it's beautiful to
oh
watch.
yeah, they're the best at that. Like the Celtics do that still, but the Celtics main thing is like they get the mismatch, they draw help, and then they start it. Cleveland is like as soon as they catch the ball, they're advancing, they're driving, they're kicking back out, they're attacking closeouts, and every single guy makes the right read and is so skilled. And like I completely agree. The point with like Mitchell and Garland having off games, Mitchell shot 4 for 15 in that game, and they handled a really good Milwaukee Bucks team because they just have so much depth. Max Strus goes off. Like he looks like he can't miss a shot. Mobley gives him stuff. Allen had a really good start to that game. Ty Jerome, like DeAndre Hunter, there's just so many guys that can get buckets and create and can knock down shots. So I have no concerns at all about their offense. Like I said, we're splitting hairs here. It's just like it came down to who I would pick in that series between the Celtics and the Cavs. And I just think the Celtics can attack their guys a little bit better than Cleveland can versus the Celtics. I don't know. It's gonna be an incredible series. It's inevitable, right?
7 game series.
That's the thing, right? I mean, if it is seven, it's in Cleveland. I
Tatum
think
legacy game.
yeah, I would still pick if it was Game 7. I would still pick the Celts. I don't know if home and road really phase the Celtics at this point anymore.
Eh,
Um,
I know we're kind of running out of time here, but also really quickly, if that is the matchup and they beat each other up like that in a 7 game series, that kind of makes me, if the West, let's say it's OKC, and let's say I'm not saying OKC's path is going to be easy by any stretch, but let's say the Celtics and the Cavs have to just sledgehammer
Right.
each other for 7 games, and then let's say the Thunder had like a 5 or 6 gamer. That kind of makes me think about what would happen in the finals too a little bit, but that's
100%.
getting way ahead of ourselves, obviously.
No, but that's totally true. Is that if the Thunder do what I think they're going to do in the playoffs, like it's a far easier path because they don't have to play, one of these top three teams, and that Eastern Conference Finals is going to be ridiculous. But let's talk a little Celtics before we get out of here. Our number one teams, 1A for you, as you would say. They are. I did give them the full number one, but they are the third offense. They're the fifth defense. For me, it's like Cleveland is the best offense. OKC's the best defense, and then Boston is, to me, second in both of those categories, which makes them the most complete team. I think they have like this mix of like Cleveland's offensive firepower, they have the creation off the bench, they have all the shooting, but they also have OKC's style of switchability and athleticism and defense with all their guys pretty much. Like not only can everyone defend, but everybody can dribble, shoot, and pass. And most of their role players are elite shooters, as well as elite defenders. So to me, like their weakness, I guess their main weakness would be like, is KP gonna make it through a full playoff run? Is Drew gonna make it through a full playoff run? But health aside, I would say they have like a real tendency to play this one-on-one style and get, you know, settling for like tough pull-up jumpers. And then you have like Tatum and Brown just kind of trying to take over and be these unstoppable scorers like a Shea or a Giannis or a Jokic. And I just don't think those guys are that level. But again, like that's really nitpicky if that's the thing you want to say is like they settle for tough jumpers every now and then and play a little bit too much ISO ball. But yeah, I mean, do you have what would be the concern for you for the Celtics?
Exactly what you said. Can Porzingis make it through a full postseason healthy? And I hope he's all right with this thing that he's got going on right now. And same thing with Holiday. Those guys have been banged up all season, or it feels like all season. But the Tatum stuff and the discourse around him, I feel like it's the best thing that could happen to you guys with the Celtics because you guys had an amazing season last year, and it feels like you haven't gotten the proper credit, and it still feels like that. And it's like this team is a generational group, and they are incredible on both ends of the floor. One of the best offenses we've seen, incredible switchability on defense, and yet I don't know if it's because people don't like the Celtics or what it is, but it's like they still have this chip on your shoulder mentality. Tatum with what happened on Team USA, and then now he comes in and he's a better playmaker and probably the best version of him we've ever seen. This is all benefiting Boston to me because everybody's still kind of like, yeah, but like, oh, Tatum's not the what did Colin Cowherd say? I don't know.
Oh my
But all
God.
these
He said he reminded him he was closer to prime Klay Thompson than
oh
Steph
yeah.
Curry, which I was like, okay.
All these narratives to me are perfect for the Celtics because Bill Simmons said it. It's the hardest thing to win the second one rather than the first one. And now you have so many, each one of these guys has their own version of like, kind of like, oh, you still don't believe in me? Well, watch this. And I feel like that's going to really help them in their hunger to repeat. And I do think
Yeah.
they're going to repeat.
I totally agree. It's a really tough path. Like the path that they went through last year it looks like an absolute cakewalk compared to what they're gonna have to do this season. But I would say like they didn't. First of all, they didn't play the best that they could have in last year's playoffs. Tatum couldn't make a jumper, and he's clearly a better player this year. They also didn't have Porzingis for pretty much the whole run, and Porzingis gave him what a quarter where he really played well against the Mavs in the finals, and obviously took over that game, but. I mean, they're still like we haven't seen the best version of this team in a playoff run, and I think that's what's the scariest thing about them. Um, it's gonna be a crazy playoffs, man. I am pumped.
I can't wait, Jordan. I'm so glad we did this, by the way. I loved talking ball with you. That was really fun. A really fun exercise.
That was awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I hope this isn't just a one-time thing. Obviously, maybe we can have you back in the future. But yeah, this was great, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you all enjoyed. We will be back soon. Max is gonna miss next episode as well, and then he'll be back after that for our regularly scheduled programming. So we're gonna be ramping it up. Thank you for coming, Armani. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.